Welcome back to the #1 spotcast of the Take Your Life Back series. Our topic is running on empty. And today we're going to take a little side jaunt from business into the personal, because when you're overwhelmed, overstressed, and burned out, it can have a big effect on your personal relationships. And if the stress is coming from your personal relationships, then that affects your work. So I'm really thrilled today to have an expert on personal relationships with us, Karen Stevenson. Karen Stevenson is a dynamic public speaker with over 30 years of coaching women into a healthier way of thinking, being, communicating, and mindset. Karen's expertise is helping women transform from an unsatisfying or dysfunctional relationship into ultimate happiness. And for the men on our summit, our spotcast here, believe me, there's going to be plenty in here that will be useful for you. Karen Stevenson, welcome to Running on Empty. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thank you. And I really appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
You bet. So I understand we're going to talk about boundaries today. Talk about boundaries in general. What are boundaries and how do they affect your energy? Why that for an energy topic?
Boundaries for an energy topic, actually, you're going to be surprised how much it can drain you. So if you don't have appropriate boundaries, your energy can be very drained because you don't know, for instance, when to say no, or you don't know when to say, you know what, that's lovely, I'd really like to go, but tonight I really need to stay in. Whatever those things are you need to say to be able to protect yourself so you don't have, unfortunately, drained energy. Equally so in a relationship, whether it be two friends or it be, you with a partner. The thing is, if you both play a little bit with boundary issues and you don't have a lot, one person could say something that triggers another, and then that person triggers, and now what you're actually doing is stealing each other's energy, and it even plays down. So.
Oh, ouch. Ouch. I can see that happening at home and in a work context both, that you set somebody off, you don't even realize you have, and then what they say back sets you off, and boom, you're off into not productive territory, right?
That's correct. And you know what? It can happen to your secretary. It can happen anywhere. Just a coworker that keeps on barging in your office. All of the above.
Okay. So you even talk about boundaries, unhappy relationships and poor boundaries stealing your joy. Talk about that if you would.
Well, sure. So when you are, for instance, a giver and you have a really giving personality, you tend to overgive lots of times to the point where you actually get drained. And even though you're doing things that are really kind gestures or sacrificing time or whatever it might be, which is a really kind gesture, the thing is, if you don't hold appropriate boundaries, then what's going to happen is you will get drained so much yourself that you will lose your joy in all kinds of ways. And actually, to be honest, it can actually make you feel negatively towards the person because you're not stating clearly the boundaries that you should have. So therefore, the other person doesn't know that that's your expectation anyway. So how can they know if you don't tell them, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So telepathy just doesn't work, huh? Darn it. Shoot. Now they tell me. So how do you set boundaries and not feel selfish? And, even before we get to that, I've known a fair number of people, including myself in my bad years, when I didn't even understand what my boundaries were. So can we talk about finding your boundaries and how you set them in a way that you feel positive about?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do see is when somebody really, for instance, just a heads up, if you didn't have a lot of established boundaries or didn't know what they were, a lot of times when somebody didn't have them and then you kind of guide them into boundaries, they kind of pendulum swing to the point where they have overkill on boundaries for a short bit until they kind of level out in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so it can be a thing to kind of go from none to too much. But let's talk about that just for a minute. What does an appropriate boundary, or what does that feel like?
Cool.
If you think of the Serenity Prayer itself, you're talking about things you can control versus things you can't control.
I'm sure most people know that, but would you repeat it for people that don't?
I wish I knew it by heart. Do you know it by
I
heart?
do. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. What is it? Accept the things I cannot change. Change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There we go.
Correct. Correct. Thank you for doing that for me.
You're welcome.
My brain was like nowhere. So bottom line is if you are trying to protect yourself, if you're trying to, for instance, first of all, you need to know yourself. Knowing yourself is really, really something that takes time. And you can't just be a doer all the time, doer, and then work, and doer, and then actually feel that you're knowing yourself, because literally it gets you always in your mind and always in your head. And actually knowing yourself comes from the middle part of your heart, soul, core, whatever you want to call it, right? So that's where you start, and you have to analyze what does, for instance, if a friend calls you every Thursday and you feel yourself gritting your teeth because every Thursday at 5, you know they're going to call you and they're going to ask you if they could come over or something to visit. And frankly, you're just burned out that day. It's an okay boundary to say, and it's an okay thing to say, to take self-care and say, you know what, I really appreciate that you like coming over on Thursdays and I really enjoy having you. However, there are some times when it's just a little bit too much and I'm totally burned out myself, and it's no insult to you whatsoever. I adore our friendship, but do you mind if sometimes I have the opportunity to say no, and I will, and that way I don't want you to be offended. Do you see? You have to find a nice way to say it rather than just all of a sudden, why do you always call on Thursdays? Another thing that's an appropriate boundary is like, I'm trying to think of, say that in public, you really don't like to be kissed, or you don't want to be overly holding hands and feel like he's always pawing at you. You yourself don't necessarily enjoy that. Matter of fact, a little bit irritates you, and you don't say anything ever. You kind of play into it, or you kind of push him away, and kind of your internal dialogue is, I can't stand this. It's driving me crazy. Why does he always do this? I wish he'd just stop. But see, that's the key. It just became an internal dialogue, and you didn't necessarily word it to them so they understand and say, you know what? In public, I really do have a thing. So if you don't mind, I understand that you're a feely, touchy person, but if you don't mind, it really does bother me some, and I'd really appreciate it if you would scale that back. And you can ask me first, because it doesn't mean always, but at the same time, it's just a little bit too much. And really, to be honest, it makes me not feel good inside. Things such as that, knowing, and rather than seething inside that's kind of a bottom liner, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. Not seething inside, whether you're at work or at home. That's a really important de-stressor, right? To get it out in a polite, firm way that lets people know how you're feeling and what you would like from them. So talk a little bit more about how you find those and set them without feeling selfish specifically, because I know that's a big issue for many people with a lot of stress, is that they are givers and they do feel like the other person comes first. And I'm unfortunately sorry, guys, but I think it is true for guys too, but a lot of women have been programmed that way, especially because we're the nurturers, supposedly, right? And we're the ones that really are the givers in that way, because we're the caretakers, supposedly. Astros twinkling everywhere, in the home, etc. So since that's the case, what happens is, if we're overgivers, even for the guys, if you're an overgiver, what happens is you find that you're being kind. It's considered, it's a great gesture. You might come home from work and you are totally exhausted, and you promised a neighbor you were going to help him no matter what, clean out his yard. But you've not even had time to do your own yard. See, now you're getting to a place where you're overgiving to the point where you can't even take care of your own self. And so that is one example. Exactly. Would you give me that question one more time so I know exactly, to make sure I answer it? I was worried about selfishness. And in the example that you gave us, it seems like one of the things is to make sure that neighbor's going to come back and help you with your yard. If that it's not just you doing the thing, right?
And a lot of people do have self-talk about selfishness. For instance, I have a friend, well, actually, she's a client, but she literally has said to me, my husband, it describes things when we are just having a regular conversation. He describes things not just once, but like in nine different ways in the 360 3D thing. And he over explains. And she's like, really, literally 2 sentences in, I'm already feeling, she can't stand, she tunes him out. But see, she was saying to me, she feels selfish telling him that really bothers her. But see, don't you think really he probably feels the vibe that she's irritated? It's reading those subtleties. And not feeling selfish equally so, to be honest, is just knowing, again, it goes back to the word self-care. There's a balance.
Yes. We love self-care in this podcast. Self-care is huge. I'm thinking that communication comes into this as a very big part. That example you just gave, where he's worried about her understanding whatever it is he's explaining, right? And she's like, I got it, buddy. I really got it. What's a great way to communicate? I got it. You can stop with the explaining now in an instant.
Okay, so for that particular circumstance, I suggested to her to maybe have a kind conversation and just literally identify that there are differences. He's a seriously strong, detail-oriented person. He's assuming that she probably is, but they've never really even communicated that, right? She's not. So therefore, he's assuming, and or his expectation is she's as much of a detailed person as him. And so therefore, without asking, without her verbalizing that she's not, see, they already have the problem. So a kind way to do that would literally be for her to sit down in this conversation and just say, I know, and I think it's great that you're a detail-oriented person. I even see that's evidenced in your work, etc. But what I want you to know is, to me, I have so many things on my plate. To hear you over-explain makes me literally tune out. Like 3 sentences in, I'm kind of a bottom line kind of person. So I'm wondering if there's a way that we could find a middle ground here that would satisfy us both. That's not insulting.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. That's even better than what I was thinking, which was something more along the lines of, hang on a second, let me say this back to you and see if you think I have it, which might just be a way of reassuring him that, yes, I'm listening and I got it now. I don't need the other 5 sentences. But if what the difference is that boundary around how much detail you need in the first place, then that really needs to get communicated, whatever the relationship is. Good thought.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a bottom line person and you're with a detailed person, that really does need to be communicated, because otherwise the bottom line person is going to really freak out. And to be honest, the detailed person is going to feel like you are being short with them. Right? Works both ways.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So the other challenge that I think people have around boundaries is, and you've already given us several examples of being kind and thoughtful and considerate when you're setting boundaries, but you also said you can overdo it. And I personally have heard, boy, are you being controlling today. So how do we avoid that situation and still get across what we need and what we want?
So remembering that there's a difference between having boundaries and being controlling. And being controlling is when you're trying to maneuver, manipulate, and or create the other person to have to do something. So in other words, a boundary is what I always like to call an invisible shield around yourself. You're protecting your own self. So in other words, you might say, what's a protecting yourself thing? Oh, back to the gal that, feels like she's overtouched. That's a protecting yourself. He might interpret that's being controlling, but see, she's just giving him information. He can choose to, this is the one where he paused her too much and she really doesn't want to have that, especially in public. He can choose to take that as a controlling, but the thing is, it's her communicating her boundary in a very healthy way. And if he chooses to take that as a controlling thing, then think of the opposite of this. I'm going to come at from the back door. Then he's saying, I don't care if this would be his nonverbal communication inside. I don't care if you don't like being touched in public or not. I want to do it anyway because it's something I want. Do you see how that happens?
Yeah.
So she then, when that gets communicated somehow, then if the woman's not strong enough in knowing herself, what's going to happen is she's going to think, oh, he's right. I really should let him continue to just do this in public because it's what he wants. Now she didn't take care of herself. And believe me, every time he does it, she's going to seethe and she's going to get more and more angry. And literally when a couple should be more like this, what's going to happen is every time he overdoes it, look what happens. She goes backwards. So he's literally chasing her away.
So because this is generally business focused, I want to make super clear that what you're talking about with this overtouching is a relationship that's already intimate, that is supposed to have touching in certain circumstances, not a work relationship. That's different.
That's true. But we could talk about a work relationship. For instance, hugging.
Yes.
Okay. There are some atmospheres and some businesses where that is an acceptable thing. Some is not. I heard recently that one company somewhere in the United States, can't name it because I don't recall what, they told people to no longer even look at each other in the eye when crossing each other in the hallway. Okay. So just think about that. So literally in the workplace, there's hugging and then there's hugging, and then you, at the same time, to be honest, at a workplace, if there was a hug or some sort of thing, I would literally say, stand your 3 foot back, your typical space, to stand back and say, I'm a hugger. I don't know if you are. Do you mind if I hug you? Now that'd be okay. Because then the person has a right to say yes or no.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so some people in our audience might say, boy, I never set these boundaries up. My relationships are based on not having boundaries at all. At least my intimate relationship is based on no boundaries. So where do I start even?
Well, you start by getting a coach.
Sure.
Coaches can definitely help you build boundaries. I mean, it depends. I mean, do you want to go on the journey of reading books? Do you want to go on the journey of talking to people? Do you want to, what kind of journey do you want? And what works for you personally? If you want to understand what boundaries are in your personal relationship, the first thing again is to sit with yourself and figure out where are things that are going on within that relationship. I don't care if it's you and a roommate. I don't care who it is. And are there things that are going on? For instance, you have a right with a roommate to say, if you have a roommate and you both buy your own food. Okay, so Susan's stuff is on the left side of the refrigerator, Jennifer's is on the right, but yet Jennifer is always going into Susan's stuff. Well, she has a right to say, do you know that really bothers me? I really, I don't mind if you ask, but for me to come back and find out things are gone, that really, really does bother me. I would appreciate it if you would not do that, or at least let's figure out how we're going to make this work. How are we going to make this so it seems fair to us both? That's, again, a way of communicating. But you have to find out, like, if you were to go through a day, do you know that one way where you can wear a rubber band on your wrist and snap it every time you're trying to have you ever heard of that? Where you can snap a rubber band on your wrist?
To remind yourself to do something or stop doing something?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Cool.
To stop thinking. So I'm just using that as a thought process, but instead of doing that, what I'm trying to steer your mind to think is, what happens if you spend the day, just one day, with real conscious awareness of what is somebody else doing that's bothering you? Then step 2, understand, can you control that or not? So if you're driving and somebody next to you is speeding in front of you and you have road rage because of it, well, that you cannot control unless you make sure you're staying in the right lane. Now, you can control it if you're driving on the left lane and somebody's trying, you know what I mean? So, but you cannot control that other person. So that's not necessarily something you can control, but you can control how you handle it in your own mind. And then at the same time, so it's all about lanes. So spend the day thinking, what can you control? What can you not control? What is within your own invisible protection of self and self-care? And then with that, you can then analyze, how do I word that? to not feel selfish myself and allow myself to get myself into a better position so I'm not going through that, which steals my joy and or drains me every day? How do I communicate that? That's a way to figure out what is bothering you. People have different boundaries.
Okay, cool. Beautiful. So tell us a story about someone who got some energy back from cleaning up their boundaries. I'm kind of springing this one on you, but I think that might be a really useful counterexample here.
Oh, sure. So for instance, when you're, again, let's go back to the constant giver, because they are the ones that most tend to have less boundaries, right? And then the people, if we're going to identify them, workplace, wherever it is, the takers are usually the ones that seem to mow over boundaries a little bit more. And if you're a giver / have less boundaries, you also are a little bit more aware of other people's boundaries, right? So here's one where you can get more energy back. Say that you have guests over to your house, but you said, come on over at 7, but you never gave an end time. And then you have the couple 3 left, and you're yawning and you're half falling asleep on your couch pillow. They're not picking up on it, but at the same time, you're like, dudes, we really need to go to bed. And they're like, oh, sure, go to bed. We'll let ourselves out when we're done. But those kinds of things can actually occur. It happens. So the way you get more, now, do you not feel how much that drained the person? That would drain my energy. Okay. The better way to do it is to have a boundary set. So, hey, everybody, come on over. I'd be thrilled for you too. We're going to get together at 7. I plan on ending sometime around 9:30. Now you've set clear intention and boundaries. You've allowed the people to know. And then when it gets to about 9:30, you need to be able to start standing up, picking some things up, saying, well, I really enjoyed it. Whatever it is that makes you feel okay, to make sure that you're scooching those people on out in order to take care of boundaries. Now that would give you more energy, because now the people are gone and you are actually relieved they're gone, and you have some time to recoup and go to bed. So actually it has a lot to do also with extroverts versus introverts. And actually I'm a high performing introvert. So I love people when I'm around them, but believe me, on the other side, I am by myself in silence, and I love it. That's how I energize myself, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's beautiful. So I understand that you have a special gift for everyone here.
Well, yes, and it goes back to the personal relationship side. So the free gift, yes, but hey, professionals have personal relationships usually.
We hope. Yes, we do.
So this particular one is a cool test that really lets you know, are you happy in your relationship? It really does ask some strong questions, and then it will give you a yes or no answer. Once you get that, it will give you the results. And then, to be honest, if you find out that you've got less than 2, that where you find out you're not happy in a relationship, I'd say, get back with me. Honestintimacy.com, Karen.
Okay, awesome, Karen. All right, Karen, this has been a really fun conversation, a little bit different than we usually go to, and therefore, I think extremely valuable. Thank you so much for joining us today, Karen. It's just an honor.
Well, Beth, thank you for having me, and I love your purpose, so this is outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.